Welcome to this week's episode of Campbell and Jones Meet the Monsters, the show where we chart the cinematic legacy of the classic monsters. I'm John Campbell. With me, as always, Brendan Jones.
Hello there, John. Hello, listeners. Hello, everybody. We're back in Drac territory today.
We definitely, well, we're back in a movie that Dracula's in. Let's say that.
Yes, we are Dracula adjacent today.
Yeah, Dracula. I mean, objectively, Dracula does appear in this film. Is it a Dracula movie? That's up for debate.
Yeah, well, I cover some of that in my little behind-the-scenes-y thing. But I am always happy to return to, whether or not Christopher Lee himself was happy to return. I'm always happy to return to Christopher Lee's Count.
Same here. You put Christopher Lee in fake fangs and a cape, and I'm there every time.
Yeah, with or without the red contacts, which come and go.
They do.
But yeah, I am. I'm down for this. Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh, I will also, of course, warn our listeners. They can't tell, but we delayed our podcast today by a little bit because I had a pretty drastic hiccup attack. So, listeners, there may be some unintentional comedy later in case they decide to come back. So I'm going to put that forward just so at no point, like an hour into this, if I start going off, I want everyone to be aware that I'm not suddenly having a stroke or something.
I think we just heard Brendan die on the show.
This is the way I'd want to go, John. This is the way I'd want to go.
I believe it. I believe it. I will say
about decades-old Dracula movies.
First time in my podcasting career that hiccups have caused a delay in a podcast, though. So that is a new experience.
So very proud. Oh, you know what? I'm going to call my mom after this.
You should. She should know. So you have prepared some background on Taste the Blood of Dracula.
I certainly did. And, you know, there's a lot that... Oh, and I will also mention, and I do recommend it. You had recommended it to me, and because I did not have Amazon Prime for such a long time, I didn't watch it. But last night I did watch Flesh and Blood, the 2.5-hour documentary that covers the history of Hammer.
It's a commitment unless you're way into the stuff, in which case, what a joy that documentary is.
It really is, and I was amazed that, I mean, I guess it has to be from the early 2000s. But they are still using, voiceover is Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, who probably was on his deathbed.
Yes.
But still, it's very worth it, and it's
the only two guys you want to hear tell you the story of Hammer.
Yep. And whenever they're doing a straightforward, we're narrating the history of the thing, but whenever they would talk about their own experience, it was always just charmingly British and as they say, plummy. It's like, oh yeah, she was lovely, and I felt so embarrassed for having to, dance around in the skimpies and you're like, of course you were, Peter Cushing, because you're great.
Yeah. They said, put a coat on her. Come on.
I do recommend it to any fan of Hammer. It's not going to tell you much that you don't know, but still.
No, but it's a really good broad overview of the history of this company, and definitely.
And I also realized how wrong my Jimmy Sangster impression's been this whole time because he is interviewed and we were making him very sort of this way British.
Yeah,
and he's like, I didn't want to do the movie. I'm like, okay, it's a whole different voice.
Yeah, it is. But that will still be our impression when he's pitching American sitcom plots.
Of course, as it should be.
Yeah.
Anywho, so some of this information came from not really that as much as, of course, the books I've been reading and Wikipedia. But so essentially for this movie, due to the success of 1968's Dracula Has Risen from the Grave, Hammer planned to produce a sequel per year. Ambitious, I would say, especially when your lead actor's like, no fucking way.
It does seem like it's like pulling teeth to get him back every time.
Well, pulling teeth, very nice. That was a nice one. See, you're always thinking. That's right. This next film, speaking of a sequel per year, the one we're talking about today is perhaps the most direct sequel Hammer ever produced, picking up immediately after the previous film.
Yeah, that really took me by surprise.
Me too. However, producer-screenwriter Anthony in quotes, John Elder, that's his pseudonym,
Yeah.
Hines, struggled to come up with a new variation on the threadbare theme. This guy, oof,
Come
he's a
on, man.
machine, but not necessarily a good machine.
No,
he
he's
was
not.
a machine.
Because number one, who's struggling? I could come up with probably 5 Dracula movies if you just told me to come up with Dracula plots.
And you know what I would do if I had been the guy that I might have made the movie about Dracula.
Oh, I mean that's our number one note across the board. Give us a Dracula-centric Dracula film.
Yep.
Still has yet to really occur.
It's very true. As stated in the book, Hammer Films, an exhaustive filmography that I've referred to a lot without giving its full title, written by Tom Johnson and Deborah Del Vecchio, quote, following the previous pattern, Hines dropped Dracula into a situation that did not really warrant his inclusion and treated the Count as an afterthought, end quote. And yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. That is the big problem that we faced before, and I have a feeling we'll be facing all the way through.
Even when he comes to AD 1972?
Well, I mean, there is the scene where he does the frug and has a trippy kind of... He does a whole love-in scene. It's pretty great.
I dig this new disco boogie.
Oh, my God. Oh, jeez. So freshening things up this time around is director Peter Sasdy, a veteran of over 100 television shows, who filled in for the ailing Terrence Fisher. Sadly, he's on his way out. Sasdy would go on to direct the classically dreadful The Lonely Lady with Pia Zadora in 1983, for which he received a Razzie Award.
Oh, which a well-deserved Razzie Award, too.
There's not a Pia Zadora. There should be doctoral theses written about her career and life.
Yeah.
How did that ever happen to us? But anyway, but I did as a pubescent teen stay up late to see all of her movies on late night cable.
Sure.
Because boobs.
Because boobs. You know, I just did a rewatch of the Naked Gun franchise. By God, she pops up in a cameo in the third Naked Gun movie.
As well, she should. 33 and a third. Is that
the final insult? Yeah.
The final insult. I have restricted my watching of films starring multi-murderers.
I will say I'm laughing, and then OJ comes on, and I'm dead silent until he leaves the screen, in which case I'm laughing again.
Yeah, Towering Inferno just isn't as funny anymore. I
was yucking it up at all those Paul Newman zingers on the Towering Inferno.
I can't watch any Robert Blake movies anymore.
These Beretta episodes don't play as well today.
They just don't.
No, it is tough to watch anytime you're just like, yeah, that guy murdered people. So I do enjoy all the times he gets hurt in Naked Gun, though, because I'm like, hopefully this kills
Oh, God. Let's not forget he was found innocent.
Yes. Found innocent. In a totally non-controversial decision.
Yep. No, went over like a... Okay. Anyway, so if the Count himself seems like an afterthought in this movie, it's probably because Taste the Blood of Dracula was originally written without Dracula appearing at all. With Christopher Lee's increasing reluctance to reprise the role, Hammer intended to replace Lee and Dracula in the franchise with the Lord Courtly character played by Ralph Bates, who would rise as a vampire after his death and seek revenge on his killers. But Hammer's American distributor refused to release the film if it lacked an appearance by Dracula. This prompted Hammer to convince Lee to return, with Dracula replacing the resurrected.
You know, we like a Dracula in our Dracula movies here in America. I don't know. Call us crazy.
There is one viewer who just wants the tits.
Yeah.
But we've spoken to that guy. He's watching most of them in Australia these days.
But hey, I mean, look, I'll still watch it if Dracula's there or not. And he's gonna love this one.
I like him, but sometimes he just gets in the way of the boobs.
Yeah. Hey, get that Dracula out of the way of the boobs.
Get that Dracula out of the way.
He's gonna be a fan of this movie.
He is, and I think a lot of the films to come, because we have finally crossed a threshold, and I did take note. We'll talk about that when we get there. But
the other thing I'll say that I find interesting is Hammer's reluctance to recast. Like, you would think just put somebody else's Dracula if they want Dracula. They won't do that. Lee is their Dracula.
It is interesting because Ralph Bates, he sticks with Hammer for quite a while, has a long career. I think he's pretty cheesy here, but you could see
him on a certain level in this movie, I will say.
Yes, but you could see him with his dark, good looks you could see him being just Dracula, but
sure.
It's like, no, Lord Courtly will just be the heir. And I'm like, that is interesting that they said, no, Chris is our Dracula. That's it.
Time and time again, Lee is Dracula, Cushing is Frankenstein, and we do not deviate.
We don't. But Christopher Lee, again, would be doing a Dracula picture under protest. He said in his fan club...
Did he want to do any of these movies? Or any of them? Is he ever like, that one was pretty good? I don't think so.
Well, he was having success doing other stuff, and it just seemed like, do I have to do this again? Mm-hmm. That's how I got started. But this is what I love about this quote from his fan club journal. Contemporary. That means in 1969, 1970, there was a Christopher Lee fan club journal.
Oh, man. I would have been part of this fan club had I been around at the time, unquestionably.
I probably would. Well, I was around, but I was not allowed, I think, to write to England or hold a pencil because I probably would have just been chewing on it.
Dear Mr. Lee.
His quote to his fan club is, "On November 3rd, I start what I hope will positively be my last film for Hammer. As usual, words fail me, as indeed they will also do in the film."
I love him writing this to his fans, who probably enjoy seeing him as Dracula.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's like, I fucking hate these movies.
Man. I love this guy, and I love his... I mean, he does show up. He shows up, and he's there to play, but man, did they have to just... What do you want, Chris? Yeah. What do you want in your trailer? Okay. Do you want just the green M&Ms? We will do that for you. But
now that you mention it, I do.
So speaking of Mr. Lee, and that's really all the background I have. It is time for factoids from the life of Sir Christopher Lee.
Yes.
Before we launch into the movie, and this one actually is just touching on how he started in film. So we had talked about his interesting aristocratic childhood, all the boarding schools, all the opera singers and so forth in his family line. And also we spoke of his Secret Service kick-assery, special forces stuff in World War II. Well, now it's 1946. So returning to London after the war, Lee was weighing his career options. They said, do you want to go teach in the university? And he's like, well, my Latin is rusty and I don't like the schedule, so no. But he had lunch with his cousin, Niccolo Carandini, because let's not forget, Christopher Lee is mostly Italian, actually.
Yes. He has the look. And he does have that Italian, olive skin, for sure.
But his cousin was now the Italian ambassador to Britain. I mean, Christopher really could have done anything he wanted to. There was money. He could, but anyway.
I like the pictures, though.
Over lunch, Lee was detailing his war experiences and showing off his war wounds when his cousin said, "Hey, why don't you become an actor, Christopher?" I mean, it was literally that. And he was like, huh. Yeah, okay.
Now that I think about it.
So he started that process. He was headed straight for film, actually, not so much stuff with the stage. We had some training, but essentially his film career got off to a long, slow start filled with background and bit parts. And his quote on it was, "I was around a long time, nearly 10 years. Initially, I was told I was too tall to be an actor. That's quite a fatuous remark to make. It's like saying, you're too short to play the piano. I thought, right, I'll show you. At the beginning, I didn't know anything about the technique of working in front of a camera, but during those 10 years, I did the one thing that's so vitally important today. I watched, I listened, and I learned. So when the time came, I was ready. Oddly enough, to play a character who said nothing." Meaning, of course, the creature from The Curse of Frankenstein, his big breakthrough.
Right.
So it is true. He literally just filled crowd scenes and had one-off lines for like 10 years.
I'm trying to imagine this guy in the background of a movie. He's going to stand out.
Well, they actually did say that a lot of his early roles had him seated. He was always like dinner tables, and they would, like just be in this crowd, and we're gonna give you the short chair
because all eyes are gonna be on him. I mean, he's just
a giant of a man.
Yeah.
Well, that just gets us started with his film career, and let's talk about one of the movies he's probably the most fond of in his oeuvre. Let's talk about Taste the Blood of Dracula.
Well, let's talk about this poster first, which is a real stinker of a poster, in my opinion.
Yeah, this one's not good.
It's mostly a giant close-up photo of Dracula with his fangs bared.
It's almost like an 8x10 glossy that he might have been his headshot, but it's him like, well, I can also do vampire.
Yeah, I know. It's there's also a picture of him as a construction worker and a cop and a sailor.
Yep. Yeah, there he is with a stethoscope. He's a doctor now.
I have such range, but it does seem like the expression is like, okay, Chris, give us vampire.
And he does. So it's an enormous, grainy, black and white photo.
Yeah.
Fills the whole poster, except across his forehead
are three more grainy black and white photos. Of the three gentlemen with goblets of the titular blood of Dracula.
Yeah, you'd have to really zoom in to tell what they were holding. But
we have our terrified leading lady.
Yep, Linda Hayden.
Yeah, and of course, the most memorable moment of the movie, the sexy lady with a snake dancing.
Jesus. Yeah. A scene that, I mean, you can see the purpose it has once you're watching the movie, but if they're trying to sell you with this, that is, all I could say is our friend would probably be very disappointed. Like, I was promised there was going to be a naked lady with a snake. I thought that'd be like half the movie.
Yeah. By the way, this guy has now migrated over to the Action Shelf podcast I host as well. He started to make appearances over on there.
Good.
Yeah. So he's.
I really like it when Chuck Norris got out of the way and just let that lady take the top off. That was good.
Yeah. We finally got into a few movies that have had some sexier moments in them, and he seems to approve.
Man, I guess it is true, especially of your stereotypical sort of that kind of action flick. There's almost always some kind of nonsense like that.
Yeah. And so,
usually a stripper girlfriend who gets killed by the drug dealers.
And my favorite in those action movies is always when there's just a boring conversation scene that's just in a strip club.
Oh, sure.
So there's just nudity behind them. Meanwhile, they're talking about, we got to get the drugs off of the docks. It's all just exposition, but there are naked women about.
Just taking care of business, just doing the things they need to do.
Because it's like, right. The gun shipment is coming in. Sure.
Meanwhile, do you have any singles?
Yeah, exactly. So we do have the title of the movie, Taste the Blood of Dracula, in a bleeding font.
Yep.
And we have our tagline here, which is, they drink his blood and the horror begins. Not bad. I actually like that tagline.
And it's again accurate.
Yeah. They're not fooling anybody on this one. Let's see if they had some other taglines here before we actually dive into the movie itself. Let's see.
Yeah, at least this one is not. They pulled back a bit and was like, you know what? For one thing, the guy who did the last ad campaign now has writer's cramp.
Yeah.
And they said, let's not turn it into a novel this time.
Yeah, I will say that. At least there's less text. There are two other. To be fair, depending on the poster, apparently it's either they drink his blood and the horror begins, or they taste his blood and the horror begins.
Yeah, it's a very important difference.
There are two other taglines though, and both of them are pretty great.
They suck. They suck.
We have drink a pint of blood a day,
which again I remember that you'd have like the the egg lobbyists have all those commercials about, how great eggs are.
Mhm.
And of course, like apples, be like, oh, this is a thing.
Apple a day keeps the doctor away, right?
Sure, I'm not so familiar with. Is there a blood lobby that wants to sort of promote? Hey, man, drink a pint of blood a day.
Blood's been getting a bad rap for years, folks.
It's good and good for you.
Where are you supposed to get your iron for the day? Come on.
Come on.
I imagine that's the tone of the blood lobbyist. Hey, come on.
Thanks, Will Arnett as Joe Bluth.
Come
on. And then the last one
is really makes this is like this a kiddie matinee movie because this really has that vibe to it, or like the Vampira late night sort of woo.
Yeah,
it's got that vibe to it because it's your favorite fiend returns with a crypt full of new and different delights.
What I don't understand is fiend is in quotes, and delights is in quotes. Your favorite fiend, air quotes, returns with a crypt full of new and different delights.
Okay.
And
I get the delights because obviously they're not delightful; they're horrifying. He's objectively a fiend, though. What are we implying? That what is the like
playing around?
Yeah,
he's just misunderstood, John. He's just misunderstood.
Well, I've been saying that about Dracula for years. Look, I'm the one who keeps saying, why can't Dracula come out victorious in one of these movies? I really do think that, especially in this movie, and we'll get to it. But like, if the plan was to make one of these a year, so you know he's going to come back, let him survive one of these things.
Oh yeah, that'd be nice.
Because then we can skip over resurrecting him in the first half hour of each one of these movies and just go to I want him defeated but still living, and I want to like until next time kind of ending for one of these.
That's what I would like as well, and we're never gonna get it. So just stop right now, because good always has to triumph over evil at the end of these movies.
Yeah.
Always.
I'm saying you could still kind of do it, but not fully.
Okay. All right, John.
Actually, this whole movie is a series of frustrations because I like a lot of things in this movie. There are a lot of ideas I like here. I love every moment that Christopher Lee is on screen. He's wonderful as always. But we'll talk about the movie. Let's get into it because I
think we should.
The beginning of this movie is pretty insane. We open on a carriage going through the woods. There are 3 men on board. One guy is a hustler of some sort. We'll find out his name is Weller. And he's like, "Aye, you want to buy a snow globe?"
He's I think he's a curio dealer, but with kind of like the shady con man-ish type of vibe.
Yeah, I mean, he's a huckster of sorts. He's I got one of these and one of those and one of this and one of that, like that. Yeah.
He's played by a very recognizable British character actor, Roy Kinnear.
Yes.
Who, you see him, you'll recognize him. He was in many Avengers episodes, but what most of you guys and myself probably remember him from was, in fact, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Anything for Ma Veruca.
That's right. Veruca Salt's father who runs the chocolate.
That was a real favorite of mine as a kid. I've seen that movie many, many times.
So he's good, and right off the bat, I'm like, oh, he's reliable, and he's being the kind of guy I expect him to be. And that's basically it. He's like, hey, people, do you want to buy a snow globe? I got this from this town, which is Carlsberg, which actually was the village that Castle Dracula was over in the first of the Dracula movies.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, interesting. That's a callback.
I know. I took
what
note
happens
of that too.
Next is really weird.
Yeah. One of the guys on the carriage appears to just be an unstable maniac.
Yes, and
but isn't
mute
continued in the rest of the movie, isn't a villain or set up for anything. He holds out the snow globe and the guy's like, "Argh!"
Yes, the salesman goes, "You want a snow globe, and it'd be this many guineas, or whatever." And the guy goes, he goes, "All right, how about just one?"
Yeah,
and the guy goes, "Argh!" It's so weird.
And then
the other guy's like, you should just give it to him.
And then he's like, "Argh!" And then eventually this crazy guy just throws Weller out of the carriage.
Throws Weller and his bags. I thought that was very nice. He's like, I may have thrown you out of it, but I don't want you to be without your clothing.
Take your shit with you. The
salesman is tossed out of the carriage, and he just lays in the road all night.
Yeah, it's a time lapse until it's nighttime, and he's like, oh, I guess I better start trudging through these dark and scary woods.
But you neglected to mention, John, that he has cut his hand as well.
Yes, so it's blood.
Some blood.
And so immediately I'm going, okay, he's gonna seek refuge in Castle Dracula or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm assuming that's how this movie's kicking off.
He's walking through the woods and he hears a fucking insane, crazy scream that sounded to me like they actually recorded it live by actually just cranking up a stereo system and playing something off a record.
I did think later when we hear it in the movie, near the end of the movie, I did want Dracula to be like, "Oh, I'm sorry that I left my boombox on. Just give me a second to turn this tape off."
Sound effects record, yes, being played
sorry.
live.
That's for the haunted house I'll be having later in the day. Yes, for the kiddies. So he makes his way. He's freaked out and he keeps moving forward, and then he stumbles into the end of the last Dracula movie. Which
so weird.
Blew my mind. We've never seen this kind of continuity before.
No, Weller, he just goes, what? He's like, and he sees Dracula with the crucifix, a big, enormous iron cross or whatever, stuck through his chest and going, ah! And then he watches him die and dissolve.
And he's got the bleeding eyes, and it seems the way they cut it like he's staring at Weller as this is happening. And to which my thought is, oh, he's gonna like hypnotize Weller while he's dying so Weller will bring him back. No, that doesn't happen.
No,
that would have been something, though. That should have been the case.
Instead, this actually reminded me a little bit of the Universal movies. Instead, Weller goes over. He has seen a guy basically dissolve into dust. That's supernatural. Has to be. Mm-hmm. He goes over there. There's the cloak. There's a bunch of red dust. I found that really weird. Mm-hmm. It's like Dracula's very jam-like, because when we see that blood going on the rock,
it's goopy and it's got globs in it.
It looks like, strawberry preserves.
It really does. Yeah, it really does have that.
But then it turns to red dust.
Yeah.
So he's like, "This is the blood."
He says, "Dracula's blood."
Well, first he knows it's Dracula because this is what reminded me of the Universal movie.
Yes.
He picks up the clasp of his cloak, and the clasp very handily. I'd say if I do the same with my own clothes. Almost all of my clothes have some sort of gold thing with my name engraved on it in case I forget what my name is.
I laughed pretty hard at him having the clasp that said Dracula.
Yeah, the clasp says Dracula, so Weller goes, Dracula. So now he knows who he saw.
The other thing it reminded me of is it's like when you get the kid's costume of Dracula that needs to identify it as Dracula. Yeah. Like when I was a kid, I went as Zorro, and my hat said Zorro on it, and I was always pissed about that.
The classic Ben Cooper cheapy Batman costume that you would get at the dime store in a box had the little Batman mask, which looked like Adam West's Batman. And then on the forehead, which we all know that doesn't happen in the comics, is the bat symbol with the word Batman in it. Yeah. Which was handy, again, in case you had forgotten who you were treating
The Zorro hat had the Z on it as an insignia on the hat, and then it said Zorro TM Columbia Pictures,
Nice. Yeah, again, if you didn't know who owned the film rights.
Yeah, exactly. Like, did y'all see Mask of Zorro this summer?
Weller gets the clasp that says Dracula TM.
Yeah. And then I do like when he says Dracula. I actually like this. He goes, Dracula's blood. Boom, up comes the title, Taste the Blood of Dracula. I like that. That I'm good with.
Yeah. And again, that's all we have at the very beginning. Warner Brothers presents a Hammer film,
Mm-hmm.
and then after he says that, and we get the Taste the Blood of Dracula title. But again, they've saved all credits till the end.
Mm-hmm.
They're starting to do that.
We just
with all
get
these
we
films.
just get the title, which is an effective. I love a scene and a hard cut to the logo of a movie. That always it makes me excited for a film.
Yeah, it's very effective. And then very quickly we get to the story we really want, which is a bunch of people at church.
I do kind of like that all the characters are just introduced quickly here at church. You know, whether or not the rest of the movie worked, but I did think like, oh, good, we're just going to get all the characters introduced up front, and then we'll get on with the movie. That doesn't really happen, but for a second, I had some hope here.
It's all relationships. You're like, okay, these are the parents of the girl. There's the guy she likes and his parent. All right, okay, all right.
Because the thing is, we basically have three families here, right?
Yes, we do.
The Hargoods, the Paxtons, and the Seckers.
Yes.
So you have Mr. and Mrs. Hargood and their daughter Alice. Alice
played by Linda Hayden.
Linda Hayden. She's in love with Paul Paxton, who's the son of Samuel Paxton. And then he has a sister, Lucy Paxton, who's in love with Jeremy Secker. So between these three families, there's a lot of, interesting, well, they would say interesting. There's a lot of romantic tensions.
Now, the Hargoods are who we're mainly focused on. Yes. And Alice is a good girl. She's very sweet. She's blonde, baby face. Mm-hmm. Linda Hayden, I do know simply because she's very much of this period. She's in not just Hammer stuff. She's in a lot of stuff. She was kind of the it girl for being. This is actually one of the sweet characters that she played, because she was known in a lot of movies for being like the tempestuous. I look innocent, but I'm really quite wicked.
Well, I believe you're referencing the Blood on Satan's Claw.
Oh, Blood on Satan's Claw! Goodness gracious me, that's a boy. Yeah. But anyway, so she's here she is. She's quite innocent. She's just flirting with Paul after church. Mm-hmm. But her dad,
he doesn't care. Doesn't like care for that, Paul. But no. I'm glad you mentioned William Hargood, because it brings me to my favorite segment, 007 Corner.
I knew it was coming.
Because this guy is in a ton of Bond movies.
Yep.
This is not one of my. Some of these have been like, that guy played Scientist Number 2 in something. This guy is in. I mean, I instantly recognize this guy. He plays the Minister of Defense in. I don't know how many Bond movies it is exactly. I'm trying to see where he first starts. I think his first appearance is in.
Spy Who Loved Me?
Yeah, Spy Who Loved Me. And he continues all the way through the Dalton movies.
That's right.
Yeah.
Living Daylights.
Living Daylights 87. Is the last one. Yeah. So, yeah. He's always the guy sitting next to M in scenes in those movies, who I presumably outranks M as Minister of Defense, and so he's always the one going, I don't know about this, if 007 can really do this, Your man out there, he's gonna whatever, he's harumph.
I also recognize him as from The Scarecrow of Romney Marsh, which is my childhood favorite. It's quite boring if you watch it now, but that's Dr. Sin, the Scarecrow, which is a live-action Disney movie from the 60s with Patrick McGowan playing Dr. Sin, the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh. So he's in that as well. He's like he's a baddie. He's good at playing. He's quite good at playing that type of upper crust, aristocratic, and also quite rigidly conservative type guys.
Yeah.
So that kind of authority he brings very naturally to screen. And here, what I liked about this movie, like you said, there's some good ideas here, is this movie is all about, and it's very much a 70s thing, the hypocrisy of the older generation. Mm-hmm. It's like the youngsters aren't getting up to bad stuff, but the older folks want to tramp down their freedom. Mm-hmm. So
because when you said
the older folks,
when you said Alice is a good girl, they're all good.
They're all good.
All four of the main kids here are totally fine. They seem to be good kids.
But Mr. Hargood is just this bastard to his daughter, saying, "Don't flirt with that guy. In fact, you're not getting lunch or dinner. You're going to your room." And she's like, "I'm like 18. What?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Go up there.
After the
shut up."
shameful display you put on today.
And she's like, "Why do you hate Paul so much?" And he goes, "You know, I don't like that kid."
Yeah. My
then
favorite
later
line
on-
I wrote down here, he goes, "You were acting like a harlot in God's house."
Yeah, she goes, he
She like
actually says,
smiled at this guy, and he's like, "Whoa!"
he also says, you are, what does he say? He goes, "You are a young woman, a sexually mature young woman."
Yes, he does. Yeah, I thought that was a like, oof. I don't think you ever want to hear your parent describe you as sexually mature.
No, and there's nothing explicit here, but there's an edge of real creepiness to this guy as well, which we find out is kind of part of his, because the wife is also wonderful. The wife is also a doting mother, and she's really sweet.
Well, because
this guy's terrible.
Well, because we find our first, he says, "You know I won't be here for dinner. It's Sunday night. That's when I do my charity work."
Yeah, once a month.
Yeah.
At the end of the month, he's like, "That's when I do my charity work."
Charity work.
And the second he said that, I said, he's going to a prostitute.
Gotta be.
I was right.
Gotta be something nefarious, right?
And also the gag is, the wife asks, "Why don't you like Paul? You know, he's the son of that guy." And he goes, "I don't even barely know that guy. It's not about his dad, because I don't even know that guy." Of course, the gag is he knows that guy very well. They're best buddies.
In fact, it immediately cuts to him and Mr. Paxton riding in a carriage together.
Right, Mr. Paxton, Mr. Hargood, and Mr. Secker. So in other words, the dads of all the younger people, they have a little group, and that little group of upper middle class aristocratic hypocrites goes out once a month to live the wildlife. They go to a crazy brothel with a flamboyantly gay, I guess not a madam. I don't know what you would call a gentleman madam.
I don't know, but it feels like a proto Joel Grey from Cabaret who shows up here.
Yes, like Joel Grey. But I was also thinking of Dean Stockwell from Blue Velvet.
Oh, absolutely. Very similar kind of makeup and design there, too.
And they're going, "You are just so fabulous, Frank. You're fabulous." And then this guy also lip syncs to Candy Colored Clown They Call the Santa.
I really was shocked by that. I was like, man, I guess Lynch took that from this.
I guess that song's much older than I thought. But Roy Orbison was alive in the 1880s.
They go for their boys' night out, and they roll into town, and they do a fake out where you see all these Dickensian orphan kids run up to their carriage, and they're like, "Oh, you give us the money to the party, you going?" And they're like, "Yes, yes," and they go through this poorhouse all the way to the back, and they're like, "Yeah, let us into the secret brothel." I did love secret brothel.
I know you did. I know you did. You were hoping this movie was called Dracula and the Secret Brothel.
Oh, I would be way on board for a movie called Dracula and the Secret Brothel. You won't believe what kind of shenanigans he gets up to in this one.
Taste the secret brothel of Dracula.
I've decided to stop with my evil ways and just run this brothel.
And this is where, again, it's 1970, and we're like, Hammer's taking another step. This movie has a flamboyantly, we'll assume, homosexual gentleman. That's the first portrayal we've had of that.
Yeah.
And then once we're introduced these prostitutes, various degrees of unclothedness.
Yes.
And our first nipple.
Yeah. That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, the first nipple in a Hammer movie. It happens here because, yes, we do get a rather long sequence of the snake woman dancing.
I found out, and I didn't know this until I watched a documentary last night. This is not the first nipple in a Hammer film. In fact, Hazel Court, who was the star of the first Frankenstein, had been in a movie for Hammer called The Man Who Died Twice, I think.
Great title.
Yeah. And there was like a artistic European cut because she's modeling for a painter.
Mm.
So she was topless in that film, and she actually is interviewed in the documentary. And she goes, "It was for the right reasons. I didn't think it was exploitative." And you're like, "Well, okay, whatever."
Did Hammer ever do anything that wasn't exploitative?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with it either.
No,
they knew what they were making. No
but judgment here, but just this whole idea that like, yeah, all these movies are exploitative, really.
But for our monster podcast, this is the first time we've actually had some female nudity.
And I'll tell you this, Brendan, I don't have any more notes because I shut the movie off at this point. I can't watch this kind of filth.
I know. I'll take it for your story, John. I got the rest of the podcast.
I don't even care where it goes. I didn't even get to Dracula.
One of the prostitutes in this scene, and I didn't know she was in it. Turns out it's her first appearance in a Hammer film, and we'll see her, I think, next week or one of the weeks coming up, is Madeline Smith here as Maddie Smith. She's not naked in this scene. Don't worry, folks. You will see her naked in The Vampire Lovers. But
well, you see a lot of people naked in The Vampire Lovers.
That's very true. But she has this really... Did you read her quote here on the IMDb?
I did not read her quote on this.
She goes, it's her first role in Hammer film. She talked about it in an interview. She got the small part in Taste the Blood of Dracula, and she goes, at the time, I wasn't a horror person. I enjoyed reading spooky stories, but I found the films too scary. Mind you, when I was appearing in them, it was just another job. And although she played a prostitute, Madeline insists she didn't have a clue what was going on. She says, it sounds ridiculous, I know, but at the time I was incredibly innocent. I was 19 years old and I still didn't know what a bordello was in those days. I just thought I was supposed to be a dancer. And I believe that.
Adorable.
Yeah, she's the one that's in the little baby doll outfit, the one that gets yanked by Courtly, the evil dude.
Well, because we have our three gentlemen here who are all sitting watching this woman dance with the snake, and they each have a prostitute on their lap. Now, the piece of information I was most fascinated by from the IMDb is the claim that Vincent Price was going to be a fourth member of this group of gentlemen. Yes, he was going to play a fourth member of Hargood's Thrill Seekers, but budget cuts removed the character. To which...
What a drag.
God damn it. I mean, all I want in the world is for Vincent Price to be in a Hammer movie. But there is something funny about these aristocratic British gentlemen. And Vincent Price is also there. Hello, gentlemen. Shall we go to the bordello?
I can see him playing the guy running the bordello. But what's amazing to me is in the course of our podcast here, and we're into 1970, we started with 1931. Mm-hmm. We have only had one Vincent Price appearance. Well, or, I mean, two if you count the vocal cameo.
Yes. He didn't do a lot of the classic monster movies.
No, that's very true. And
we have talked about devoting an entire season of the show to a miniseries on just the films of Vincent Price at some point, which
would be so worth it.
I think we will do, because those are great classic monster movies of a different sort.
Yeah, and it's always a delight. Speaking of people like Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, who when they're on screen, they own it, and you love it, and they never phone it in. Mm-mm. It's the same with Vincent Price. Mm-hmm. You're going to be delighted. It doesn't matter if you're watching fucking The Fly or The Abominable Dr. Phibes or The Pit and the Pendulum. Mm-hmm. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, he's a real deal actor committing completely to it, no matter how
even just
dumb it
really
is.
Awful films. Yeah.
Whatever. I'll say it. So yeah. So there are the brothel, and then an unwanted gentleman parades into this place. We don't know who he is as of yet, but the guy running the brothel is like, no, not you. Get out of here. We don't want you here. We don't know what's going on. We'll come to find that this is it Lord Courtly?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, Lord Courtly, played by the scenery devouring Ralph Bates.
Yeah, he someone slipped the leash off this guy. And like, Oliver Reed made quite a splash when he made his, and he's like, I'll fucking double that. I'll double down what Oliver Reed did.
I'm going to soak the entire audience in the splash I'll be making.
He did start his career as being one of that breed of I am the hot young guy who's going to just bring all this charisma, and it doesn't work the way it does without Oliver Reed.
Well,
but Ralph
he
Bates
doesn't
didn't
have the
a long-
machismo of a Oliver Reed. He doesn't have the just like, damn, that's a man, you know.
I know that's very true.
He's a little bit more dainty.
He is.
Yeah,
but his character is supposed to be. We get a lot of exposition kind of quickly here about him. He is a lord, but he's been disgraced and disowned by his family and has no money, which is one of the reasons why the guy didn't want him in the brothel.
Mhm.
The guy, because they're like going, well, if he doesn't have any money, how does he pay for the prostitutes? And find out the prostitutes are supporting him because they love him so much.
Yeah.
And the fact that he dabbles in black magic.
Yes.
That's his thing. He's supposed to be like Aleister Crowley.
Yes.
He's basically Aleister
That's
Crowley.
very much the vibe I got from him. Because it is sort of like, ooh, black magic using.
He's so decadent.
Yeah.
And instead of hating him for stealing Madeline Smith, and I understand why Hargo would be like, fuck that guy. He stole Madeline Smith off my lap.
Mm-hmm.
They're instead intrigued by him. Our three, I won't say heroes because they're not heroes. They're all assholes.
Yeah, I just called them the three gentlemen in the script, or in my
the three
notes.
gentlemen.
Yeah.
But they want to go have a chat with this guy.
Yeah. Say,
He
can
thinks they're
can
gonna-
we buy you some supper? And he's
Yeah.
like, he mentioned some place that's obviously expensive, and they're like, oh, and he's like, it's the only place to go.
Yeah, and they're like, all right, fine. And you know, he's a charismatic grifter.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so he's now going to have a nice dinner off these guys. They do have individual personalities. Like Hargood is the real kind of dark asshole-ish
Yeah.
dick. The one that's Paxton, he's kind of just along for the ride. Like he's actually pretty wimpy and
He's pretty nervous about all this stuff.
he's nervous about everything. And of course, he's the one that's always going, how much is this going to cost? He's worried about the money on it.
Yeah.
And then Secker's kind of intellectual out of them. He's the one that actually figures out what's going on and
Secker to me
almost
is
has a hero turn.
Secker to me is the George Harrison of the bunch. You know, he's the quiet one. He's the He's the intellectual. Yes, I see.
He's the one that almost becomes the vampire hunter at the end.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they take him to dinner.
They do, and he's like, well, it's pretty obvious what you gentlemen get up to. You're out there, you're bored in your fancy home lives, and you come to the city for a little fun, but you're now bored with the fun you've been having, isn't it? I've sized you up perfectly. Because
they go, yes, you have.
Yeah. And this is my and they're like, well, can you help us push things a little further? And he immediately goes to, well, do you gentlemen have any interest in selling your souls to the devil? He opens with sell your souls to the devil.
It's not like, you ever been to a leather bar? Instead, he goes right to, wow, what do you feel about selling your soul to the devil? And of course, incredibly conservative, supposedly religious guy, Hargood is the first one to go, what does that entail?
Yeah. What would that...
Sounds interesting to me.
Just out of curiosity, what would that look like?
Yeah, and what do I get out of it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yes, lots of stuff. Yeah, they are just all like, well, we haven't sold our souls to the devil yet. That would be a fun new venture for us.
That is something I've kind of toyed with, and...
And so this is when he says, all right, well, if we're going to do this, gentlemen, we're going to need to get some stuff. Which at this point...
He basically says, yeah, you guys are going to bankroll this.
Yeah, because at this point, though, we cut back to the homestead, and Paul has arrived at Alice's window. And he says, aren't we going to run away together? And she's like, whoa, I can't just run away right now. And he's like, well, then I guess you weren't serious about this whole thing then, were you?
Oh, gosh, boyfriend-girlfriend drama. Her main concern is her mother.
Yeah.
She's like, look, I would leave with you in a second. It's just that if I left, Mom isn't ready for that yet, and it would destroy her. She might even just pass away. She might die if she's left alone with that asshole.
Yeah, you know the asshole my father is. I cannot leave my mother with him. Like, that's going to be terrible.
And he's like, oh, okay, well, what are we going to do? And she's like, well, I'll give you a handy. And again,
you may have watched a different version than I don't think my cut had that line in it.
Oh, I had the European cut.
Yeah, right.
No, she doesn't
said,
say,
I'll give you a handy.
No, they're very prim and proper.
Yes.
But it's also, I think the score is quite good in this. But I thought it was very funny. The whole, she's up in her room and she comes down the tree when he whistles for her. She climbs out onto the tree and comes, because this is 1970. In 1969, Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet was one of the biggest hits of the year. And of
Yes.
course, that had the romantic theme of Romeo and Juliet.
Oh,
Became
the
such a
oft used, parodied. I mean, like
unbelievable.
you've heard it.
So,
Every figure skating duo at the Olympics uses it.
yep. And this wasn't, something I picked up in any of the reading I did, but I guarantee you off camera they're like going, "Ooh, let's have the music come up here, and let's have the whole thing of her coming down in the gorgeous gown.
It-
She comes down the tree."
It
I'm like, yeah,
definitely
Romeo.
has
Yeah.
echoes of that. It can't be avoided. I got that vibe from it as well. I mean, hell, even the Brady Bunch used that theme when they did their Romeo and Juliet episode where Marcia played Juliet.
Perfect.
Yeah. And so then we cut back to Courtly has now taken them to Weller's place, and he's like, "Hey, get the stuff." And he's like, "Oh, really?"
I did like this because, because we're now about half an hour into the movie, and I'm like, are we ever going to get around to even getting a sip of the blood of Dracula? So we find out.
I'm getting the taste for the blood, man, and they're not satiating me.
I will say that we have neglected to mention this whole thing is now, this is all in London
Yeah.
or is England, but I'm
Yeah.
sure it's London.
Well, yeah, it seems like the big city.
Because he mentioned when he was in that very opening that he travels all around, but he's from London. And so that's why he was in, I don't know, whatever made up town the last Dracula movie took place in. So we are now in Weller's actual place, which is a curio shop. So it's full of weird occult stuff, which is, you look at it and just go, wow, Hammer just dumped out its props room.
Open up the
little
warehouse. We'll see what we find.
Yeah, there's an Egyptian sarcophagus in there. There's all this stuff. But so we finally see our friend Mr. Weller from the beginning again, and he's like, are you gonna pay? Because he knows that Courtly has no money.
You're currently living in a place due to the kindness of prostitutes.
And he goes, yeah, we're gonna buy the thing that I've been looking at.
Yeah.
And he's like, how much? 100?
Oh,
or
no,
was it
1,000 guineas?
1,000 guineas.
Well, because he pulls it out and he goes, yeah, you got your cape. You got your clasp here engraved with Dracula's name.
Is the signet ring.
Yeah, right there.
And here, in this tube, is all the crystal light you need to make yourself a strawberry pineapple punch.
I do like Ralph Bates commits. He's over the top, but he commits because when he grabs the vial, he's like, "The master."
Yeah, the master.
Yeah. And I do
which
like,
is amazing.
yeah,
It's holding what looks like a big glass tube of either crystallite or paprika.
it does. Yeah, it's just a red powder. And they're like, I don't understand. How does this get us to sell our souls to the devil? And Weller does have a line here. He goes, "These pieces belong to the most evil man of all time."
Mm-hmm.
You can see here, his name is Dracula, but backwards it seems to say Alucard. Get him!
Quick,
Somebody get him!
Mirror. This mystery has confounded people for ages. Yeah,
and so
like, no, it actually says Dracula TM. So is this Draculatum?
I don't.
Who's Dracula?
I don't know. It says it's trademarked. Are we infringing on some intellectual property rights by doing this?
This belongs to the most evil intellectual property of all time.
Is this stuff officially licensed? We cannot take a lawsuit right now. So yeah, they're all like 1,000 guineas, and yeah, Paxton's like, yeah, it's a lot of money, and they're like, oh, Paxton, if you don't want to pay it, then you just, I guess, won't sell your soul to the devil. And he's like, all right.
all right, I guess I want to do it. And Courtly is just like, you'll be repaid
Mm-hmm.
10,000 times over,
Yeah.
and you're gonna live forever. I mean, it's all this like, I, I just, I don't understand. I mean, yes, bored rich guys, but at what point does it's a big jump from prostitution to, I mean, I want to sell my soul to the
Well, 'cause it's
devil.
like we're bored with the prostitute, so I guess next step is sell our
Is
souls to
eternal damnation. Yeah, eternal damnation.
It does seem like, are there like a couple steps in between?
And then,
Maybe we
you know,
could like sacrifice a goat or something. I don't know.
becoming thrall to a vampire lord is also kind of, I don't see the appeal.
Yeah.
I do like the way this movie shows that Dracula, when he's done with you, he's fucking done.
Oh, it's good stuff. There's some great Christopher Lee shutting people down in this movie.
We should inform our listeners that Dracula does show up in this film.
Yeah, he's any minute now. Dracula will be showing up in this picture. It's still a good 10 minutes, I think, though, before they actually get to him appearing.
Yep.
Because they got to hike up to this old abandoned church.
Yeah, it's a desecrated church, which weirdly, I guess, is in the Courtly family.
Yeah.
Simply because the one crypt inside of it does have Courtly on the name of it.
Yes.
So I guess it's in his family. But it has been desecrated, and he's hung over the religious tapestry. He's hung a black magic tapestry with Baphomet or Asmodeus or some demon on it.
It is just like Courtly being like, this is where I do my magic.
Yeah, and this is very, again, we're the late 60s, early 70s, pop culture is leaning hard into Satanism now.
Yeah.
And as a spook tactic. So we've got black candles in here too. And the rich guys are looking at each other going, this shit's legit.
Yeah.
Are you getting as scared as I am?
Yeah,
because
man.
look at this shit.
Boy, this guy he really does know the devil.
And then Courtly has the gall, the wherewithal. He puts Dracula's cloak on.
I was not cool with this. This is the real desecration, in my opinion. You are not fit to wear that cape, sir.
I just wonder where he gets just the idea for all of this, because let's say he's a black magician and he runs into this guy and he's like, yeah, I've got the dried blood of Dracula. How does Courtly know that this is how you do this stuff?
Yeah, I don't know.
Is it in a book?
I guess so. Has my copy of Vampire Rites of the Undead come in by any chance?
Essentially, Courtly is up at the front of the altar and he goes, did you bring the goblets?
Yeah.
And they go, they're right here. And he goes, good.
And so he pours a little bit of the powdered blood into each of their goblets. Then he slices his own hand open and pours a bit of his blood in, which makes these goblets like overflow with blood now. Yeah,
again, really thick blood. It's kind of a cool effect when you see the powder instantly kind of like bubble up and become a liquid that's supposed to be blood, and you're going, surely that much powder and that much blood could not then fill that whole goblet, but it does.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to market this as a low-calorie drink as well.
It actually does look like a protein shake. Just an extremely bright red protein shake. Or a V8. It does look like a V8.
Well, have a V8,
Vegetable pulp. So Courtly has his own goblet, and then he basically stands up there and goes, now we all need to taste the blood of Dracula.
And then they're all like, it's blood, it's weird. And he's like, drink it!
Drink it! And they're like, almost about to.
Yeah.
Courtly goes ahead, he quaffs his.
Well, first he goes, you cowards! And then he gobbles his down and immediately starts choking and falls to the ground.
Screaming. He's got blood all over his mouth. He's like, help me.
And their instinct is,
you know what? Get the...
their instinct is, let's not help him. Let's kick him to death.
Yeah, they all kind of drop their goblets, and none of them taste the blood of Dracula because they've seen what it does, and they're like, I don't want no part of that shit. So they drop their goblets, and then for some reason they go, well, we should probably kick and beat this guy to death.
Yeah, they proceed to just start kicking him until he is dead, yes. Which I did think, I don't know. Okay.
It is a weird thing if someone, I mean, yeah, they're not this guy's friend, but he's rolling on the ground screaming, "Help me," and they're just gonna kick him to
Doesn't
death?
it seem like they would just run out of there and not kick him to death? I don't know what led to that. Anyway, they kick him to death.
What led to that is screenwriting, because they realized that Dracula was going to be, they had to put Dracula in their Dracula movie.
Right. So they kick him to death, and then they all just run home because Hargood returns home, and he's traumatized, and immediately he just goes to his wife and goes, "I was here all night, all right? Listen to me. If anybody asks, I never left. This is an alibi, sweetheart."
Literally says that.
Yeah.
And
I need a fucking alibi.
Then, like, Alice comes in, he's like, "I was here all night."
Yeah.
There's nothing more suspicious than anyone saying, "If anyone asks, I was here all night."
He enters the house in a panic. He's wide-eyed, grabbing people by the shoulders and going, "You have to tell whoever asks I was here all night." Because I definitely wasn't out kicking a man to death.
Now, who would even trace them back?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
The only people who saw those three guys with Courtly.
Mhm.
So let's say they find Courtly's body. Who kicked this man to death?
Yeah.
Maybe the waiter at that one club
Right.
would have seen these three guys, but does he even know who those three guys are?
Yeah.
They don't go there all the time.
No.
They probably know Courtly as the lazy guy.
And
with
if
no
anything,
money.
they probably would write it off as like, well, that guy was messed up in some shit, and this was going to happen sooner or later. I think this murder would be written off really by the people of London because he was a weird dude doing weird shit.
Yep. Wearing a knockoff Dracula cape that has the name Dracula on the clasp.
Oh shit, he was doing his Dracula role play.
I hate LARPers. LARPers can suck my cock.
He asked me, he got what was coming to him.
Lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt. See, I just threw a bunch of beanbags at you. Now you're dead.
So we do cut back to Courtly's body, and you gotta love this effect of a heartbeat sound and the camera zooming with each beat of the heart. Da-thump, 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 da-thump. Heartbeat zooms.
At this point, I know what's coming, but at the same time, I'm like, well, that's not a bad way of doing it. And then they ruin it. Then the cheapest, most god-awful looking thing happens.
Dust swirls all around and covers Courtly's body.
That part I kind of like. I'm like, all right, then the dust will blow away and there'll be Christopher Lee. But instead, they do this weird zoom in to like caked clay looking version of the dust.
Yeah.
That then breaks apart.
Yeah.
And underneath the clay is what could only be a projection screen where they have literally photo projected Christopher Lee's face in repose.
Yeah.
It's a terrible effect.
And he opens his eyes, and his eyes now aren't bloodshot. They're just fully red.
They're just red orbs.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I like that effect.
And I'm like,
I like that look for Dracula.
Yeah, it's a good look.
And Dracula appears, and he looks down at, I guess presumably he knows that Courtly's dead, and he says, "They have destroyed my servant. They will be destroyed."
Well, Courtly's gone.
Yeah, Courtly's gone, but I guess he knows that Courtly's gone because he's back.
Yeah,
and
he's in his body. He's like, well, I've taken over the.
I will say, you know what? This is like 40 minutes into the movie. I'm going, fucking finally, yeah. Let's kill some people, Dracula. Let's do it.
The motivations here are just so weird. They killed my servant. I will get revenge. You're like, don't you have better things to do?
He doesn't care.
You don't care.
He'd be happy he's back. Why does he care if this guy died? He didn't even know this guy.
He doesn't even know he's in England, I'm sure, at this point. It's going to take him a few minutes to realize where he is. And he's probably sitting there going, where's that blonde chick that totally dissed me in the last movie? Where's that goddamn kid that was the atheist? Well, I want to get my revenge on them.
It is a thing that drives me insane about these movies is no other characters ever continue from, like, why doesn't he go after those people again? Wouldn't that be the better sequel? Is now he's hunting them now?
Going, Van Helsing. or
Well,
Father Sandor,
God,
or whatever his name was.
Wow, you know we want the Van Helsing Sandor movie.
God damn it! Why didn't we get that?
Yeah.
Now you've made me mad.
Only you and I together, Sandor, can bring down the Count.
Damn it.
I will say that we have now been quite a few Dracula movies in here, and I am so missing Cushing as Van Helsing. We don't ever have anyone. We have no heroic character who matches up to Dracula at all. So it always feels lame when they end up defeating him, because I'm just like, no, they don't. You're not worthy of it. Only Van Helsing is actually worthy to go toe. Well, and Sandor. That guy did kind of rule.
He was awesome.
Yeah.
But I am so looking forward to the day that we meet the Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires.
I do love that movie. It may be
Even
silly
though
as
it's
it is.
not as Dracula. That's the only thing that hurts.
That is a bummer. Although we will get Cushing back come AD 1972.
We do, as a descendant. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry if I spoiled it for our listeners. Anyway.
And I just look exactly the same because I have to be in this movie.
Dude, it's just like Colonel Steve Trevor's son ends up looking exactly like Steve Trevor when Wonder Woman jumped from the 40s to the 70s.
Yeah, because this show's getting too expensive. All this period shit, get her out of there. Yeah, so Dracula's back. He's pissed that a guy he didn't know is dead. Dracula, who's killed countless of his own servants. Maybe it's a thing where, like, I can kill the people who work for me.
I think that's it.
You can't do that.
Yeah, I think that's it. He just needs to always show who's boss.
Regardless of motivations, Dracula on a revenge path, I'm here for it.
When he's going after these people, meaning the three rich asshole guys, and he starts counting them, I was like, number 1, number 3.
I love that.
It's very much, I'm sitting there going, this is very Fibes.
Yeah.
Just like the revenge plot and then going, 9 killed you.
Yeah.
9 shall die.
Because he goes, when he does it, he's like, the first.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Lee sells it. It's good stuff.
He sells Dracula all day long.
Any scene with Lee in this movie, I'm loving it. But if you were to actually add up he has maybe 20 minutes of screen time in this thing.
I think you're being generous, like 12 to 14 minutes.
Yeah,
but still.
Much. It's not much, but they are sweet, sweet morsels that we get.
Those are nice little bits.
Mm-hmm. Because instead, it's the next day now, and Paul and Alice learn that their friends Jeremy and Paul's sister Lucy are engaged to be wed.
Everyone's happy. These are good kids.
Mm-hmm.
These are good kids. They all have fun. I like them.
I mean, they're having fun. I don't know if I like them. I mean, I don't dislike them. I do think the guy in this movie.
What do you have against?
I do think the guy in this movie. Who is it? Anthony.
Which one?
Anthony Higgins, who plays Paul. I think he's pretty good. He's certainly better than a lot of the other leads we've seen. He does go on to play a Nazi in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Oh, and he's in The Bride. Speaking of other takes on classic monster stories, which as a movie we'll get to at some point.
Oh boy.
He's in that though. He's a guy.
King and Jennifer Beals. That is the pair of the century.
He's also in Young Sherlock Holmes, which is a movie I loved as a kid.
Yeah, me too.
So anyway, he's continued to work to this day. I think he's pretty good here. I mean, it's the standard part, but I find him more compelling than some of the other bland protagonists we've had.
I actually think that the last few movies we've watched, whether they're Dracula or not, they're starting to get better, fresh, young talent.
Mm.
Now, they don't really keep them around for many movies, but the acting generally has gone up from the, I say, what a terrible thing this count is.
We don't have a lot of those guys anymore, which is a good thing. It seems to be sort of veteran character actors and pretty competent, like, theater school graduates.
Yes. And they are trying to trend young. So they are trying to pick people who look like this generation, even though this movie's set in 1880, whatever. They're trying to, like, these guys are cool. And they're anti-rules, man. They're just like you. Look at these hypocrite old people. They're all assholes.
Ah,
And the
you don't
youngsters.
get it, old man. I mean, they went so far as to put Roger Daltrey in one of these, you know?
They really did.
He knows about your generation. He sings about it.
And he hopes he dies before he gets old.
Mhm.
And sadly, those hopes were not realized because he's still with us today.
Yes. I'm glad he is. He's still rocking.
Sure, man.
He'll never stop rocking. So let's see. Oh yeah, so they're like, "Oh, congratulations, that's so good. We wish we could get engaged, but my father hates him for some reason." Ah.
Yep.
And so then they're walking. Jeremy and Lucy leave, and then
Okay, hold on.
yeah,
Before we go any farther, I feel I did you a disservice. I should have called out the amazing Linda Hayden impression that you just did. For our listeners at home, if you haven't seen Taste the Blood of Dracula,
yeah,
that was dead on.
she sounds just like a Monty Python character. Oh dear.
I wish we could get married, but oh, our parents don't like you.
We didn't. Yeah, we didn't say this is actually not Linda Hayden. This is Eric Idle playing this character.
Long-haired Eric Idle of
Yeah.
1970
Mhm.
as what's her name?
Alice.
Alice.
Yeah.
There you go, Alice.
Oh, Paul, I love you. No, so they're walking, and Paul says, "You know, it's a funny thing. My father's been pretty distraught. He hasn't left bed in 4 days. He's not talking. He's not eating. It's really strange." And I was like, my father's been acting strange too. He's drinking way more than normal. I wonder if that...
Almost, they kicked a man to death.
Yeah, they're just like, I don't know. So then she goes home, and there is drunk Mr. Hargood.
He's losing it, man.
And she's just like, you haven't been acting like yourself these days. And he's always like, oh, what is this about my drinking?
Yeah. By the way, if anyone asks, I've been home for the last 3 months. I've never left the house.
You tell them I haven't set foot out of this house in 2.5 years.
I have forgotten the color of the sky.
I just love the idea that she's obviously not the first to talk about the drinking, because he's just like, oh, here we go, the bloody drinking.
And was there mention of is this where she wants to go to the party?
Yeah.
And he's,
well, because he says, why are you all dressed up? Because she's in this fancy dress. And she's like, I'm going to a party with Paul.
Lucy got engaged. And
No,
we're going to a party.
you're not with Paul.
You're not going to any fucking party.
I forbid it. He says, I forbid it about 8 times.
Yep.
Forbid. I don't care how much whiskey I've had. I forbid it. The foot is down. I have spoken. So then Paul does. Oh yeah, then Paul arrives at the door. He goes, yes, I'm picking up Alice. He's like, no, you're not.
No, you're not. She's not going to the party.
Yeah. And
yes, I've had some whiskey. And if you need to know, I haven't left the house in 15 years. But sir, I saw you at church just last week. Lies.
I am a noted shut-in. No, and so I do like he goes, what? Why do you hate me so much? I haven't done anything. He says, you don't have to do something to hate somebody. Then he gets in a coach and rides away. What a dick moment for this guy.
I don't think he has anything but dick moments all the way through. But he rides off, which basically...
But I do love, why do you hate me? I don't have to have a reason, is basically what he says.
Yeah. I think it's just because I know what your dad gets up to.
Yeah.
Because we go whoring together.
Even though...
And I don't want my daughter marrying a guy whose father goes whoring.
It does seem like if you had a teenage daughter, the portrayal of Paul is kind of the ideal boyfriend you'd want for her. He's
the
nicest guy in the world. They only present this fairly chaste relationship. It's all very sweet. They really love each other. They want to get married.
The handy scene was pretty graphic.
Yeah.
I'll get you the European cut.
Yeah,
I'll
right. That's right. But from what I gather, that was really Alice who was the aggressor there.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. He was very reluctant. But he does not leave. Even though Dad goes away, he kind of hangs out in the garden. And then once Dad's gone, he's like, hey, Alice. He does the whole window thing again.
Yeah, we're back to Romeo and Juliet.
She's like, oh, why are you here? I can't go to the party. He goes, come on, your dad's gone. Come to the party with me. I'm tempting you. And she goes, well, okay.
And then there's just this one shot. It cuts from this to Dracula stalking about that desecrated church like, oh, I'm going to get him. And then it cuts back to this. But it's just like, it's almost just like, we haven't seen Dracula in a while, and we don't see him for a while after this. We should just cut to him real quick to let people remind them that Dracula is in this movie.
Yep.
Because it's just like, and a little bit of Dracula, and then back to the three gentlemen who are like, oh no, what are we going to do? We killed the guy. We totally killed that guy. None of us are handling it well.
And they're like, should we go check on his body? And they're like, why?
Yeah. And they say
it'll be found by bums.
Well, they actually say most likely no one will find it, and even when they do, it'll be months from now, and they'll never be able to figure out what happens. Nobody goes up there. Nobody cares about this guy. He was a weirdo. And so they all, I guess, leave with some sort of like, well, I guess we're probably in the clear then. But Secker does pull Paxton aside and goes, hey, come here. Keep an eye on his drinking.
Yeah.
Because like, he's going to say some shit, probably.
He's pushing that alibi thing a little too hard.
He told me he's never left the house in his life.
And yet, he's clearly not in his house right now.
He just told me that when we got in the coach.
He says that he's lived his entire life in his mother's womb.
I was never even born.
He says he has a little couch in there, a little bed, and he's just in his mother's womb.
I think I hope this is the booze, my friend. So yeah, he's gonna keep an eye on that. Then we get so cute. Paul and Alice are frolicking through this fountain.
Oh, it's adorable.
Yeah, it's just they're so in love. And then they kiss, and she goes back to her room, and they've had a wonderful night at the party. And when she climbs back into the window, what's this? Her father's
Dad.
waiting for her
With his cane.
And I like she does. She's just like, well, obviously I went to the party with Paul. I don't like.
Yeah, I'm not lying.
Yeah.
I totally did it.
I'm also 25 years old.
And then he goes, well, I haven't whipped you since you were a little girl.
He ominously closes the door to her bedroom and then
goes,
pulls out a riding crop.
Yeah, or I thought it was his cane. Or it could be a
No,
riding crop.
it's got the flapping kind of leather into it. Yeah.
And he's like going, you're getting a good whipping. And she's like, no, daddy. And it's like chasing her around the room.
Yeah. Luckily, she's a young, fit girl, and he's a drunk old man. Yep. So she's able to avoid him pretty easily because he collapses to the floor in an embarrassing heap. It's pretty sad stuff.
Sadly reminded me of the way most of my evenings end.
Oh, God.
Oh, I gotta wake up tomorrow, watch a Hammer movie, and talk to John.
Yeah, it's the state.
I've never even left this apartment.
I don't want anybody to ask. I've been in here my whole life.
Anybody ask? There's a global pandemic going right now.
Yeah, this is all just one big alibi, this whole pandemic. No, I wasn't inside. Got to stay inside, quarantined.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
So yeah, he's chasing her around. She goes back out the window. She's calling for Paul because, her father's attempting to beat her. He's going to whip her good. She doesn't find Paul. Instead,
who does she find?
Oh, she finds Dracula.
It's great. He just steps out of the woods.
Hello there.
And what's great is he's coming for the guy, but it's almost like he sees the young lady. He's like going, oh, added bonus.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
well, because as we learned from the previous Dracula film, he'll fuck somebody's daughter as revenge, man.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
What's weird is, am I wrong? In this scene, he calls her by name. He just goes,
He
Alice,
says
come
Alice,
here.
and she says, "How do you know my name?" And he's like, "I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to be mysterious and creepy."
And I myself am like, vampire lore, telepathy, but that's usually between you and someone you've already bitten. But
Yeah, it's the
it's
because
like going,
he's
Alice.
hypnotizing her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he is. And she goes very willingly.
Well, because this is a hunk and a half of Christopher Lee.
Uh-huh. He basically just opens his arms, is like, come here, baby. And
Mhm.
she's like, yeah, okay, sounds good.
And then Hargood's out here stumbling around drunkenly with his riding crop, still looking to whip
Yeah.
his daughter. And then Dracula, finds him. Dracula sees him. He's like, "What?" And then Alice is there too, and she's got a shovel. And I do dig this. He just goes, "Now," and she
Yeah.
puts this shovel into his side of his head.
She lays her father out.
Here's the thing that I love about Dracula's plan at this point is he proceeds to have only the children of these people murder them.
Yeah. That's a pretty wicked and
Yeah.
very Dracula thing.
That I love. This part of the movie with Dracula hunting these people down and going like, "And I'll make your children do it." I'm like, fuck yeah. This is the Dracula I like.
Dark stuff. Now, the one thing is, this movie plays pretty fast and loose with like, he nibbles you once and you're like totally, I mean, this is not like you die, you rise, you're
Right.
a vampire thrall. This is 2 minutes later that he could have this girl kill her father with a shovel.
Right. It's right away. But she's not turned, which is weird because then Lucy is turned, but he got to Alice first. But the movie needs it to be a happy ending, so Alice is okay at the end of the movie. That's the stuff that really doesn't work here in the script, where I'm like, what? Because they're like, no, Lucy's gone. She's too far gone. But you can still save Alice. And I'm going, why? Why would he turn Lucy, the second person, but only mind control Alice? But then we're also not dealing with the fact that Alice did kill her father then, so that's going to be traumatizing to her.
I know. When she wakes up, she's like, oh, I've killed my father and I led my best friend into the clutches of a vampire that then killed her.
Yeah.
Whoa, it's not good.
And her fiance also is wrapped up in that too, because he's going to get it as a result of this. Does he, though?
Well, he got bitten. I don't know if he dies or not.
I don't think he does. I think he's just a vampire loose in the world, maybe.
Or there is that middle ground where you're kind of a thrall and not a full vampire.
Yeah.
You've been bitten and you are, because Mina ends up that way in the novel.
Right.
Where she's not full vampire because you have to do the back and forth of the blood and you have to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to die and then you rise, then you're a vampire. So there's this middle ground that I think
these movies though have been pretty inconsistent about these rules.
Very true. And with what Lucy goes through, I'm like, why would he have bothered to turn her? Because she is turned. She's got the fangs.
Yeah.
But then he's like, I'm done with you, and drains her. I'm like, wait.
Pretty quickly drains her too in a very anticlimactic scene. Though I did think once, like, he had the kids killing people, I thought, oh shit, maybe this is going to be the dark, bleak vampire movie I'm looking for, where they're all going to be dead at the end of it. No, they always. Anyway, we'll get to it. It's dumb. Anyway, into the movie, late into the movie, he finally arrives. Michael Ripper's here.
Michael Ripper. I mean, I saw his name in the credits.
I was like, maybe he's not. Yeah, here he shows up as Cobb, who's an inspector of some sort.
He's not comic relief, but he's clearly shown again to be like small-time inspector who doesn't believe anything, and it's kind of, and he's really he's pretty insensitive, just like going, well, they're dead. What clues? What are you talking about?
He's looking at Hargood's body, and then Paul's like, yes, he's dead, but his daughter is missing. Shouldn't you put out a bulletin saying to, and he's like, girls run off all the time.
Girls run off all the time. She's 18.
Doesn't he have some line about, if I put out a bulletin every time a young woman around, it's all we'd be doing around here.
And you're like, this guy should not be reelected to office.
Hey, Nobody else wanted the job.
I will say, always glad to see him.
Michael
Welcome
Ripper,
back.
always great, always great.
We enjoy it.
Yeah, and really, he is the stalwart of the Hammer cast here. He is the guy who seems to be in all of them.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, he's
Even
consistently
though his
been in.
parts are always small.
He's been
always
in what?
great.
Probably the last 5 or 6 we've watched.
Yes.
He just keeps popping up. And when he showed up late in this one, I'm like, hey, Michael Ripper, happy to see him. There he is.
There's my buddy.
Yeah.
There's my buddy.
There he is. Now it's a Hammer picture. So then, yeah, they have a funeral for Hargood, and Paul takes Mrs. Hargood home. And then, but also leaving the funeral is Lucy, and Alice is in the woods going, hey, Lucy, come here.
Yeah.
And Lucy's like, oh, hey, everyone is wondering where you are. And she's like, oh, yeah, I've got so many things to tell you. Come meet me at my house later tonight, and I'll tell you everything that's been going on.
Maybe this is something that runs in the Hargood family, but the whole idea of her like going, hey, we're going to catch up. It's going to be awesome, but don't tell anybody that you've seen me because it'll spoil the big surprise. It's just like the guy going, if anybody asks.
Is this like how your father said he never left the house once in his entire life? It's exactly like that, Lucy.
So Alice is being like mysterious, but she's being all flirty and fun about it. Like, this is a delightful thing. Meet me in the garden.
Something we haven't mentioned is this is a Dracula movie with a female character named Lucy, and obviously it has nothing to do with the thing. But when you put a Lucy in a Dracula thing, it's gonna call up things in my mind.
You know, just when Dracula eventually starts saying Lucy, I'm just like, oh yeah,
yeah.
That
sounds right. That sounds right coming out of his mouth. Yeah. That's Dracula.
How about a Mina?
Yeah.
How about a Mina?
No. Nope. Not for Hammer. I don't think Hammer ever has a Mina.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No. So yeah, and then Secker shows up at Hargood's after Paul has brought her home, and he wants to talk to Mrs. Hargood, but instead he ends up talking to Paul. And I like Secker's like, have you happened to hear if they're looking into any of this, or if this has anything to do with, I don't know, some kind of murder in the city? Like, he's just going and he's like, wow, no. And Paul's like, I'll tell you what, that inspector is a moron. He's not investigating at all, actually. He doesn't seem to care a bit. And Secker's like, yes, too bad. You really should be looking into it. But anyway, I've got to go. Yeah, so it
does make it. I can't remember the logic behind why Secker and Paxton decide to go back and check and see if the body's still there.
It comes up later because it's Paxton's idea. We'll get to it in a couple scenes here because Dracula because we see Secker take off in his carriage, and then Dracula just kind of pops into frame like, yep, still in this movie. And once again, there's a lot of, it's clearly daytime, but they want us to think it's nighttime. There's so much of that in this, as there is in all the Hammer movies. And I love that there's whatever, they put maybe a faint filter on it, but they really don't bother to hide that it's just the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Basically just going like, whatever. Because Dracula's just walking around at 4 p.m. But then later is real panicked when it's sunup. So, you know, whatever. So
is this gonna really bother you? Is this?
I can't get past this, man. I once again had to turn the movie off at this point.
But don't, because one of the things you love is coming up, which is horse whipping.
Yeah. And more horse whipping. I mean, we almost had girl whipping in this movie, so
it's true.
Yeah.
We just have horses being driven very quickly, but not as much whipping as you.
No. So Alice shows up and is like, Lucy, come get in this carriage to me. I'm gonna take you to see somebody. And Lucy's like, ooh, do you have a new lover, Alice? Ooh, a tee. And then, man, does this carriage speed up, and Lucy is not cool with it.
It's it's become a trope of movies with cars where it's like, oh, the crazy driving, I can't handle it. It's a little weirder when it's in a horse-drawn carriage.
When they cut to
it's going too fast.
When they cut to the carriage from the outside, I'm like, doesn't seem to be going that fast.
But I do think Linda Hayden here pulls out some of those tools that she used in some of the movies where she is like the bad girl.
Yeah.
Because here, when she starts just evilly laughing at her friend who's freaking out, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
pretty good.
I like Linda Hayden in this movie. Well, I said I think across the board, everybody's pretty good in this.
Everyone's pretty good.
Yeah,
acting fairly top notch.
Yeah. So they take off, and she's like, make it stop! Somebody stop this thing!" And then it does. It just hard stops right when she says that.
And eventually, Alice stops laughing.
Yeah. And they get out of the carriage, and what's this? They open it up. And there's the man himself. Old Count Dracula's back in this movie.
Oh,
yes,
I missed him.
I'm back in my own film.
And he's pretty much, this is where he's calling out to Lucy.
Yeah. And she comes over and she's hypnotized. And then when he bites her, I think this is the most orgasmic vampire bite reaction I've seen in a movie. Yeah. It's up there.
Well, I mean, she also screaming out, "I'm coming, I'm coming."
Yeah, I thought that was a bit on the. Well, you know what? That's that European cut again. Yeah.
No,
there's all kinds of talk of coming in that version. I really thought that was strange.
But it's similar to the last Dracula film, and the fact that there's a scene with one character who the first time she's bitten, it's the same thing. Like, this is the best thing ever. But then there's a scene later in the movie where the same character realizes, oh no, this is the wrong kind of biting.
I like that. I do like that.
I'm about to die.
Because
biting.
I thought here, I'm like, well, that's a bit much. But then when it goes the other, I'm like, oh, well played, actually. I actually like that.
Well played.
That is good. This
when
being
they
bigger makes...
realize, oh no.
Wait a minute. Yeah, he's not... This is not the fun kind anymore.
This isn't sexy fun time. This is, he's done with me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, so he bites her, this is then when we cut to Paxton is talking to Secker, and he's like, oh my god, you know what it is? Dracula's back, and he's coming for us, man. That's what this is. And Secker's like, will you calm down?
Actually, he doesn't say Dracula's back. He's saying, like, Courtleigh's back. I think the thing
back and coming for them. Somebody has...
he thinks that maybe we didn't kill him, and that Courtleigh is taking his revenge. That's why he's like, the only way to make sure is if his body is still there. If his body's still there, then it's somebody else. If his body's missing, he's the guy trying to off us because we kicked him.
And so they go back to we kicked the living shit out of that guy. That's what we do. We're kickers.
I'm sorry to our more sensitive listeners.
Look, man, if they've gotten this far, they can't be that sensitive.
I mean, we fucking De Niro curb stomped the motherfucker.
Oh, man.
We Irish the fuck out of this guy.
Oh, no. 70-year-old De Niro kicking that guy.
That is some of the weakest curb stomping.
It is, especially when a guy who famously, there's that great shot of him kicking that guy in Goodfellas. That's amazing.
Oh,
and then when you watch that and you're like, oh, he can do all the technology you want. That's a 70-year-old man kicking somebody. Yeah, couldn't get a body double in for that? Whatever.
That's Samuel L. Jackson running in Captain Marvel.
Yeah, you also get Pacino getting out of a chair at one point in The Irishman, where I'm like, oh, he's struggling.
Yeah.
There's a distinct...
Pesci rules that movie, but I love the fact that his character is always seated.
Yeah.
It's like they let him be strong just by staying in a seated position.
I'll do the movie, Martin, but I'm not standing up.
You see him try to transition from standing to sitting to standing.
Yeah.
Then you lose all respect.
Yeah. Pesci does rule that movie. He's amazing.
Oh my god, he's so good in it.
Yeah,
anyway.
Incredible. So they go to see, and yes, Courtleigh's body is gone, and they're like, well, wait. Maybe somebody moved it, Secker says. Peck's like, oh, who would move it? Why would that happen?
Come on!
Come on! Oh, man. I just want the cast of Arrested Development to do a monster movie.
I would love that very much.
Come on! So they...
You know, Tony Mayo should be the romantic male lead.
Yes!
He should be the Jonathan Hester of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I shouldn't.
Maybe it's a vampire. Oh boy. So
Dracula. Oh my god. Anyway.
but they're like, well, let's look around. There's these massive stone coffins. We should open those up and see if somebody put his body in one of those.
Yeah. Weak, but sure, why not?
They open it, and my God, it's Lucy. She's
Yeah.
dead. Paxton, no, she's
Paxton's
dead.
My daughter, Lucy.
When he keeps saying she's dead, and Secker goes, no, she's something between living and dead.
Secker is, I mean, we don't know these people's backgrounds, but Secker, we've seen him in libraries and reading books and studying, so I guess he's the intellectual. He somehow kind of knows this stuff. He sees the bite marks on the throat, and he goes, she's something else. She's something worse than that, and we have to finish her off. The only way to free her soul.
Well, he actually says she's a vampire. Look at the marks on her neck. She's a vampire now. There's only one way to release her. Drive a stake through her heart. And he goes over and grabs a piece of wood, and I like he picks up.
Piece of masonry.
Yeah. It's like a bust of a head. It's like a cement bust of a head. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna drive this in. And Paxton fucking pulls a piece on him.
Yeah, Paxton pulls a tiny little 1880s gun on him and is like, no!
I like that
It's my
Paxton's
daughter.
still dainty even with his little revolver. Like, no!
Like, get away from my daughter. And he's like, we have to do it. Why don't you do it? You're her father. And he's like, I can't do it. And he's like, well, then let me. He's like, no. And he shoots his friend.
Paxton shoots Secker in the arm.
Yep. And Secker, like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And grabs his wound. And
stay with your vampire daughter.
which was the original working title of this movie. Stay with your vampire daughter.
There must be a movie called that. That sounds like something from the 50s.
Stop or my vampire mother will shoot. Don't tell
the unfulfilled sequel to the Stallone classic.
Don't tell mom the babysitter is a vampire.
I love that picture.
It's so good.
So yes, Secker's out of there. He's do what you want, man. If you want to have a vampire daughter, that's on you.
Yeah.
And then almost instantly after Secker leaves, Lucy wakes up.
Yeah, well, doesn't Dad?
Her eyes.
Dad is like, maybe I should do it, because he does pick up the stake and put it against her chest. And I will say this about this movie: we've crossed another boundary. This movie is where they figured out where the hearts are.
Well, yes, but to
All
be fair, we never
stakes are
actually
in
see it. Because now we're just showing boobs, so why not also stabbing boobs?
Yeah. Amen, brother.
Yeah. These movies are just about, people seem to like boobs. Yes, I do.
And you guys, we are working on our t-shirt designs. One of them will be Stabbing Boobs with Campbell and Jones.
That was an early idea for the name of this show, but we figured, it doesn't apply to every movie so well. So
that's your opinion, and we still argue. But anyway, moving on. Stabbing Boobs.
So her eyes come open. He's like, Lucy, and then also right on cue, there's Dracula right next to him.
Yep.
And he's like, no, he doesn't shoot at Dracula. I was waiting for the classic, like, bang, bang, it's doing nothing. I'm going to throw the gun at him now. Like, I'm waiting. I want that Superman Dracula moment where Dracula just keeps coming and he's taking the bullets. That doesn't happen.
No.
Instead, he kind of gets scared into some of the pews and falls over into them.
Which basically just allows Lucy to loom over him.
Yeah, and she now grabs the stake and the little piece of masonry and holds it over him and his chest. And then, once again, Dracula's like, no. And this is pretty gnarly. This dude gets a stake driven through his heart and blood spraying up onto his face. I'm loving all this. This is what I'm paying for, man.
I know. It's good. The blood squirting's quite good.
It really is. And him,
nice little reservoir.
and him just screaming, and he's still alive with it in his chest for a while too.
Yeah.
Which is like, I don't why?
Yeah, it's terrible. He's just been killed by his vampire fanged
And
daughter.
she's grinning with the fangs, and he's got the
Yeah.
stake in his chest, and like I said, his whole face is coated in the blood from the splatter. And then he dies, and we get Dracula saying, "The second."
Yes.
Yes, love it. Love all this. Love when Dracula's just having, because Dracula only kills his own servants. He doesn't kill any of the people because it's a way nastier thing that he's doing.
It's interesting. It's like it is a good concept, and Lee always brings it. In this movie, though, he is essentially immobile.
Yeah.
In this movie, he stands and he gestures, but I don't really need to see him running up and down stairs or across rooftops.
Those are some of my favorite parts of the other movies, though, because I love
I
how
like the cloak for
athletic
that fact.
and physical Lee's Dracula is. But you also need a Van Helsing for him to grapple with to do stuff like that.
Sure.
It seems like.
Yeah. But here our Dracula is essentially he walks out of shadows or behind trees and just says things.
That's a way to play Dracula as sort of a mythic figure. This because they are really playing him as the devil here, right? He's influencing evil.
Yes.
And so this dude gets staked good though.
Steak so good.
Yeah, and so then Secker has gone home. He's still holding the gunshot wound on his shoulder. He's like, hang on, I have to write a letter. Let me write this letter before I get this wound treated, before I forget what I was going to say. So he starts to say, we don't know what he's writing yet.
I think he's quite possibly going to bleed out as well. This is like last movie we saw. It's people getting shot and going, I just need to get in a coach, get home, do some stuff.
Give me like 2 days before I bleed out fully. Because last week that guy was bleeding out for like 2.5 days.
From a gut wound. This is sort of like
this guy's just been shot in the arm. This seems survivable. That guy was stabbed in the gut and pouring blood everywhere he was going. I just imagine there's just a trail of blood behind him. So he goes to write the letter, and Lucy, meanwhile, has lured Jeremy out because she's like, because they're engaged, right? So she lures him out and bites him, and this is Secker's son.
Yeah, Jeremy, who we really haven't called by name. He hasn't had a huge part in this, but Lucy's betrothed.
Yeah.
So she calls him out, and then she gets him.
She bites him, and then suddenly, like, the door to Secker's office opens as he's working on this letter. He's like, oh, Jeremy, it's just you.
Yeah, again, this probably takes all of 3 minutes to suddenly be a vampiric thrall.
Yeah. And then he's like, what is it, Jeremy? And Jeremy just fucking stabs him.
Yep.
Just guts his own father. And then, of course...
He does see the bite marks as he's dying. He's like, oh, they got you, not you! Not you, my son!
Yeah, and he's dying. And then, of course, Dracula steps in. He's like, the third.
Yeah. And then he goes, all done.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. He actually looks at the camera and goes, see ya.
Goodbye, everybody. That's the end of this Dracula movie.
Till next time.
Yeah, hopefully not. Once again, don't want to do this shit. Make that abundantly clear time and time again. Read my fan newsletter.
Make sure you sign up for Christopher Lee Fan Club.
I'll tell you whatever. What a time, by the way. The equivalent would be that would be the equivalent today of Christopher Lee getting on Twitter and being like, I fucking hate the franchise I'm committed to. Back then you could do it because nobody would know it. It's just in the fan letter. But now he'd be in huge amounts of trouble with the studio for like bad mouthing the franchise. And but I do love where he's just like, I'll tell you something, fans. These movies fucking suck.
He was the Ray Fisher of his time.
Oh, yeah.
That's unfair. I took an easy joke. I'm sorry. It's not the same situation at all.
It's not. But still, that is one of the rarer examples of somebody just coming out against the studio for, justified, perhaps. But so now all three people are dead, and I am now thinking, what is Dracula going to do now? He's kind of finished everything he wanted. He had nothing beyond that in this movie.
At this point, he just is cleaning up loose ends.
Because he's walking. He and Lucy are walking home. They're just walking through the woods, and Lucy's like, "I did good, right? I did so good, Master. I did everything you wanted, right? That was a great job." And he's like, "Oh, Jesus Christ." I do love this. Is not the first we've seen of these servants who want praise from him, and he's just rolling his eyes like, "I don't need this."
It is interesting that the idea of Dracula, from the novel, and the whole thing is Dracula is trying to spread vampirism, is trying to obviously feast, but also he's trying to create a nation of his people because he is the Lord of the Vampires.
Absolutely. Not this guy, though.
This guy is like, I don't want... It's like, baby, don't get hooked on me.
Yeah.
It's also a very 70s thing where he's like going, I don't want any kind of commitment. Yeah. I'm a commitment phobe.
I told you this when we got together, baby.
This is a casual thing.
Yeah. I'm living the Clooney lifestyle.
This is where he leans in, and this is where Lucy discovers that there are different kinds of bites. And this is the bad kind.
I wish this was a better executed in some way. Like, her acting's great on it, but he drains her so quickly and she's dead. It almost seems like he didn't drain her as much as he gave her a death bite.
Yeah, it is.
And now
the
death bite, you die. Like,
it is quick. He does lift his mouth and has blood on his mouth, which I'm like, we're getting a little bit more graphic.
I like that. But once again, I would have liked to have seen something more that indicated he was draining her, because it seems like he normally bites her, except for her reaction.
Yeah. And I do like the whole thing. I mean, we don't see this happen. We just see the aftermath, because Paul will find Lucy's body.
Yeah.
And it's in the lake.
He just dumps her.
Dracula just dumped her.
Yeah. Well, what else am I supposed to do with garbage?
Oh, my God. That is the way he treats these people.
Yeah. I was done with it, so I balled it up and threw it away.
That's it for Lucy, you Lucy fans.
I like that. I did like, once again, the idea of this, though, where he's just like, I didn't fucking want to be with you. You've done what you needed to do.
You killed your father for me. Yeah. Awesome.
You got your fiance to kill his father for me. And now I throw you in the lake.
To B to C.
Yes, I will pay the littering fee, all right? It's fine. Oh, what is this, a $50 fine? Sure, I've got that.
I've got that in ancient Transylvanian gold.
Yeah. So then we bring our friend Michael Rippers back, because the inspector is now investigating, of course.
And he doesn't care. He still doesn't care. It's pretty great.
He's investigating Seckers, and he's like, oh, I thought you... Because Paul's there. He's like, I thought you'd be interested in this letter he was writing just before he was murdered. Because it is addressed to you, Paul. And he's like, what's in it? He goes, oh, typical... I wrote this. He actually says, typical ramblings of a lunatic. He's talking about vampires and whatnot.
It is... pretty great.
They do say what happens to Jeremy, because he goes, pretty clear the son hated him, so he murdered him. Don't worry, we got him locked up down near the precinct or whatever.
Which is interesting. That is a loose thread, because they don't follow up on that.
Yeah. And then Paul's like, that doesn't make any sense. He and his son loved each other and had a great relationship. He's like, it went sour at some point, I guess. You can never know about these things. Anyway...
You're asking me, a public servant, to think?
Yeah.
Well, fuck you.
Yeah. So
I ain't got time.
He's out of there. He gives. He's like, here, have your crazy person's letter. I just love typical ramblings of a lunatic. We see this kind of thing all the time.
I've got a stack of them in my desk. Some of them talk about werewolves. Yeah. There's one about a zombie of some sort.
What's that, Joe? Oh, don't worry about it. Just another lunatic letter. Don't worry. It's like the
remind me to make a collage of these. They're taking up too much room.
We gotta clear this file out. We gotta tidy up around here, because I imagine it's just him and like one other cop, and that's it for the police force.
That would have to be.
Yeah, it's him and some doughy drunken guy, and that's it.
Is that another ramblings of a lunatic letter?
Yeah, another one.
Oh, all right. I'll put it with the stack.
We really need to do something. We need a cleaning lady. That's the movie I want, the spin-off about the police force of this town.
And I still want to see 70-year-old Martin Shove go, they're all crazy.
Yeah, I read the letter. He sounded crazy.
That would have been the best cameo of all time.
I just want him at the very end of these movies, after everything, and he's just like sweeping up, and he looks up at the camera like, oh, yeah, that was a crazy movie.
I love it. He comes and goes, what, you still here? He does the whole Ferris Bueller.
The movie's over. Go home.
What are you, crazy?
That's the shirt we need to make, is just a picture of Martin, and it just says crazy.
The towel on his head.
You still here? What are you, crazy? Yeah.
And
it's got to
audience,
be. It's got to be CRAAAAZY. Crazy. Yeah.
Audience loses their
shit.
They
did it. He's the Stan Lee of these movies.
I wonder if he had his own fan club. Make sure to check my fan club journal.
Yeah,
it's great.
This week's journal. Yep, still didn't get any more acting work. Anyway,
I need to relook him up on IMDb and see just what his life was like if he kept working.
Well, after that performance, come on, I'm sure he got a ton of work.
Errol Christ.
Yeah. Are there any more scripts where there's a guy who calls people crazy? Because I'm really good at that.
I have what you might call a specialty, and it's calling people crazy.
I see under special skills, calling out craziness. Anyway, back to the actual movie. Yeah, Dracula, having disposed of the garbage, returns to his desecrated church, and Alice is there, and he's like, oh yeah, I didn't get rid of you. And so he goes to bite her when cock-a-doodle-doo, it's the rooster with the sunrise. He's like, oh shit.
Dracula really should have invested in some sort of alarm clock.
It's a classic. It's a classic Dracula mistake across all these movies. He's doing all of his business like 20 minutes before sunup.
Yep.
He just can't resist.
To finish her off. He does not finish her off.
Right, and so then he's like, well, I'll kill you later. So he gets in his coffin, and then she sort of lays on top of his coffin like, I'll be here when you get up. Which I actually kind of like that. And so meanwhile,
because you're a creep.
Yeah.
The creepiest thing ever.
Look, I sleep in a coffin, and I've asked all of my partners to have slept on the coffin.
Like you're devoted to me, like I'm your vampire lord.
Yeah. I mean, look,
I have to go, John.
Yeah.
I have to work early tomorrow. See you later.
What's this? I'm sorry. Who's this John? I believe I told you to call me Master. Yes, Master. See, Renfield gets it.
He does.
Yeah. So Paul reads Secker's letter, which is just like, well, it's too late for me, but you should know a thing or two about vampires because you're the one who can stop it. And then
you
blah,
have
blah,
suddenly
blah.
become the hero.
Read these books, grab these things, go kill yourself a vampire. There's 10 minutes left in this movie. Let's wrap things up, is basically what this is.
Is what it says.
So Paul heads out on his way. What does he say here? He says, it's too late for Lucy. She's been turned. But you may be able to save Alice. As he says, she may not yet be his sister in blood.
Oh, sister in blood.
Yeah.
If she's a sister, I think there's more than just blood drinking going on. It is.
Look, I come from a different time. We did things differently, all right?
And
Have you
again,
ever seen Game of Thrones?
we don't have any way of why Secker would even have thought that Alice is still savable since she was the first.
He didn't
But the
even
movie
see
doesn't
Alice.
that
He's
either,
to assume he only knows Lucy's a vampire.
because he saw her in
Yeah,
the
they didn't actually see it. Anyway,
Yep.
the ending doesn't quite add up to this
Nope.
movie, like a lot of these things, and like unfortunately a lot of the scripts from this guy just isn't his story math doesn't ever really work. It's consistent across all of his scripts. I just feel like there's always just like, I get where you want to go, but you're not doing the work to get there.
He has some decent ideas. He's just not a very good writer, and we've seen that time and time again.
His structuring is horrible. It's always just like, because he has to. Like so many of the things in the movies, because the movie has to end. I don't know.
Because I have to get them to this place.
Right. There's so much like that. So anyway, Paul takes off to track down Dracula, but on his way there, he does find Lucy discarded in the lake, and he's distraught about that. But then he's like, well, anyway, I still got work to do, though, so I can only mourn for so long because I'm going back. So he gets to the desecrated church, and this is where he's hearing the echoes of these crazy screams. And it was where I just wanted Dracula to push stop on the... Sorry, my cassette player was set to autoplay.
Did that work?
Yeah.
Did it spook you?
Let me say
I
this.
hope so.
Will you take this survey about my haunted house?
I was up all night making that mix.
Yeah.
That was for you.
Yeah. Now, how did you feel about my cobwebs work? I think they're pretty spooky. Anyway.
On a scale from 1 to 5, what did you think about the grabbing hands?
Yeah. And I was worried about people not recognizing me, so I wore this pendant with my name on it. I hope everyone knows. So you can tell I am Dracula.
Does that read from a distance?
Yeah.
Can you tell?
Yeah. Do I need to make it bigger? I have no mirrors in here, so nobody calls me Alucard accidentally. Anywho, how you doing, Paul? Don't worry, she's not yet my sister in blood.
Nope.
So yeah, Dracula comes out at him, but Paul's got a cross, and it's for some reason an LED lit cross, like the way this thing.
It's pretty fancy.
Yeah, he lights up this cross, and Dracula's like, "Oh no!"
That's really good. That is almost exactly the way it comes across. Oh no!
I mean, one of the things I hate about, as much as I love the Hammer movies, one of the things I hate about is Dracula does always become sort of a whimpering coward at the end of them.
At the end of almost every one of them, I mean, he better than anyone knows what tools will be used against him. But it always seems to come as some startling surprise.
When he busts out that cross, he's like, I didn't see that coming. Who brings a cross?
And
that's not fair, man.
It's a desecrated church.
Yeah.
And Paul does these simple actions. I'm like, oh, does that make it all better? Because he takes down the black magic tapestry, and there's the Christian tapestry underneath it. He puts a white cloth on the altar and changes the candles to white candles.
And he reads some prayers or something, doesn't he? Because isn't there something about like, ooh, whatever, Bible shit? I don't know.
We don't actually see him forming those words.
Somebody's saying something in Latin, though.
Yeah, there's some sort of prayer, but we don't know where it's coming from. And again, it sounds like someone pushed play on a tape player.
And then this decision makes no sense because Paul is actually confronting him, and Alice is like, "Oh, hey, master." And he's like, "Get away from me!" And I thought, why at this point would you say "get away from me"? Because now she turns on him after this. This is a mistake to reject her here. Keep playing along, kill this guy, then kill her. You know. Yeah. But instead he's like, back off, lady, give me space.
Yeah, and then she's like, well, fine. I'm not your sister in blood yet, so I'm just going to hang out with my previous boyfriend and fuck you.
So he's holding the cross, Paul. Then they open up, there's another cross on the wall that's now uncovered, and so Dracula's like, oh, 2 crosses, can't move now.
And he barred the door with a cross.
That's the one he is, because that's where he's like, he thought of it. Damn!
Ooh. And then Paul tosses the cross he had in his hands on the ground. Again, I think that's like, I'm pinning you. You're now pinned.
Yeah, because he is sort of like, I can't move.
I.
And then Paul uncovers one of the stained glass windows that has a cross on it. He's like, oh, more crosses. I don't like this at all.
It just occurred to me I'm in a church.
And so he bashes out that stained glass window. And then he climbs up to the second tier of the church, Dracula, where the organ is. And he's grabbing, I don't know, like pieces of wood or something.
Well, let me correct you on this. His stunt double climbs up to
yes. Yeah.
It's pretty obvious. This is another tall guy, but he's got this wig on, this Christopher Lee Dracula wig, and it's so
officially licensed and available in a store near you.
Right. He's pulling up chunks of, again, statuary or something to toss at them.
Yeah.
Including like a stone urn type thing that he throws. This cracked me up. And it ends up in one of the swinging chandeliers. And that's how I could tell, as the audience could, that that's not really stone, because that would have completely crashed that chandelier out of the ceiling and to the floor. But instead, it just sort of catches on it and makes the chandelier swing back and forth.
I will say another thing I don't enjoy about Hammer Dracula are his feeble throwing of things at people.
Yeah,
this has happened a few times where he's like, eat candlestick.
There's strange resistance, and that did come up in the documentary, but there's strange resistance to give him a lot of the traditional vampire powers is just weird.
Yeah.
The fact that he ends up, literally being just this physical being that has to throw things and run. And you're like, what about turning to mist or a bat right now? That would help.
He's just chucking like wooden slats at a certain point here. He's like,
well,
take that.
He starts grabbing the pipes from the pipe.
That's what it is.
And throwing them like javelins.
Yeah.
As Alice and Paul start running for the door. And
at some point here, it hits him that this church is reconsecrated, I guess, because he starts seeing a nice, clean, normal church, and he's like, no, please, no. And he slips and falls and does like a tumble onto this white cloth altar, and then that kills him.
Yeah, this is
the worst Dracula death.
Yeah, it's pretty well, special effect.
Oh, it's fine because he dissolves. I mean, it's classic. He dissolves, and he's just a skeleton.
But there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing legitimately causing it. Okay, is it just the pain of being around all these holy artifacts? I thought it was like, is sunlight coming through the glass? No. He just falls on this thing and then crumbles away. And you're like, well, fuck you, movie.
Yeah.
And then we cut to Paul and Alice macking on each other.
And they're like, we made it. And then the movie ends.
We made it. Yeah. And then 2 minutes later, Paul goes, didn't you kind of kill your dad?
And she's like, yeah.
And didn't you lead your best friend and my sister to her death?
Or no, she's like, oh, you would bring that up.
You would bring up Lucy. Oh, I guess you love your sister more than me. And it becomes a whole other movie.
Well, that is another thing, too. It's like, you did sort of lead my sister to her demise. Anyway, I still want to do you.
I still want to do you. You're so cute and British.
I mean, she is.
She is.
Yeah.
She's adorable.
Yeah. But yeah, there's
very, very baby-faced.
Very much so. Very much so. And but yeah, they do just sort of go off, and I did have the same thought where I'm like, I'm sorry, are they just going to be happy together?
Yeah. Will no one admit to what has happened here?
And Inspector Cobb is just like, oh, nothing happened.
Typical ramblings of a young couple in love, covered in vampire dust.
And then also, isn't his father staked over in the corner of this church?
Yes. And he would not have turned to dust. So that is a recognizable corpse.
Hey, is that my dad over there? Oh yeah, your sister sort of rammed a wooden stake through his heart. That's crazy.
Jeez.
They make everything so dark and tragic, and then at the end they're just like, whatever, let's go get married.
Yep. As if the happy ending wipes out any possible consequences of what they've gone through.
Right, yeah. I mean, certainly no legal consequences because according to the inspector, nothing has happened.
I always want to do some, PTSD follow-ups for these people that survive werewolf and vampire attacks.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, are you ever going to sleep a full night after this stuff
Well,
happens?
I mean, keep in mind, you number one know that evil creatures, the undead, are real.
Yeah, they exist.
And also, is anyone going to work on getting Jeremy out of prison? Or is he taking the fall for all of this?
But he's a vampire. Or no, I guess he's a thrall. He probably has snapped back just like Alice at this point.
Yeah.
Which means he will probably take the fall for the murder of his father.
I did what?
Did I do that?
This little known fact, the Urkel catchphrase is taken from this movie.
Oh, God.
Oh, did Urkel ever fight vampires? There were a lot of episodes of that show. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
I don't know. I know there was androids at some point.
Oh, by the end of that show, complete insanity has broken out.
He had cloned himself or something. I don't know.
Well, and then there was the cool, sexy version of him, Stefan Urkel, which was very much the Nutty Professor kind of thing. I watched that show as a kid.
You know what we're going to do? We're going to stop talking about that show.
I thought you were going to say we're going to drop this show and start doing a Family Matters rewatch podcast.
I can't do it. I cannot do it.
That's a lot of Urkel.
That's so much Urkel. Make sure, all right, listeners, make sure you got your bowl of Urkelos.
I ate Urkelos as a kid.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah, I definitely did. Any tie-in cereal I had as a kid.
Did I eat that?
Oh, that had to have been the catchphrase for it.
I'm sure it was.
Anyway, do you recommend people watch Taste the Blood of Dracula?
I do. I mean, it's not great, but there's
some
enough
good stuff here. I would say I did enjoy the movie, even if it's not one of the best.
No, it's not a great Hammer film. It's not a great Dracula film, but it has enough of the elements that work. And when Christopher Lee's there,
I know it's tough not to recommend anything with Christopher Lee because it is like, oh man, the 12 to 15 minutes you get of him in this movie is pretty great.
And the 5 or 6 lines.
Yeah.
Really, as he said,
5 lines of dialogue. No. Yeah.
Well, I do recommend it. And
it's better than some and worse than others.
Yeah, we're heading there, John. We're getting into the Hammer weeds.
Yes. Yeah. It's coming down to it.
It's going to end up being, I think, some pretty our love of cheese and badness is going to be really tested.
I will say, because some of the ones I really enjoy the most actually are near the end here. Because well, some things like Vampire Circus are batshit insane. And yes, Captain Kronos is great. Captain Kronos rules. Like, Captain Kronos might actually be my favorite Hammer movie. I just love Captain Kronos.
Yes, we're not there yet, though.
No, so I do next week. Oh, things are getting sexy next week.
What?
Because it's the vampire lovers. The lovers.
Oh, yeah. And we'll be doing our Will Ferrell impression. Like, the meat of the goat, the delicious juices running down our chin.
I love
the vampire lovers.
The lovers, yeah.
This is a big jump. Now, we'll also talk when I get there. Hopefully, I'll find some good background on Hammer was feeling the pressure. This isn't all Hammer generated, but a lot of the turn they take at this point, where it's like, you need more sex, you need to spice stuff up, is coming from outside too. They're looking at what the American market supposedly wants, and they start.
I already said we want boobs.
Yep. Lesbian vampires next week. Not Dracula related necessarily, but based on Carmilla by Le Fanu.
Yeah. And we do get our beloved Peter Cushing back next week.
We do. And so that's always good. And it is, I will say this, well, that's going to be a bad pun. I was going to say a stacked cast. That is not what I intended. But it is a fun cast of women. Like, it's not just the one token, here's our hottie. This is Ingrid Pitt, Madeline Smith, Kate O'Mara, who I've always liked, very striking lady, and she's very good in this. So it's an interesting cast that's full of ladies that just
Yes.
happen to be, of course, very sexy.
Yeah.
But
This is our first. This is our first Ingrid Pitt movie we've done on the show.
absolutely,
And she's certainly
with her
somebody
first-
who is very affiliated with Hammer.
Yeah. She's there for their last few years and becomes a real kind of touchstone. And she's just, I'm not saying she's, an award-winning actress, but she's got that something that I always is like, that's worth watching because she brings something to it. She's also great in a small part in The Wicker Man, speaking of Christopher Lee. The Wicker Man, it's shame we're not doing that one. It doesn't really correspond, but it's a great Christopher Lee movie.
Classic horror movie. I also just saw her in, she doesn't have a huge part in it, but I just was watching Where Eagles Dare with Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood.
I think Where Eagles Dare might have been her first English language film.
Quite possible.
Then Vampire Lovers. I could be wrong, but
I think that's right.
Anyway, join us for that.
Yes.
And it should be a very interesting left turn.
For sure. Yeah, something a little
Maybe
bit
not
different.
a left turn, but we'll veer slightly.
It's something a little bit different next week.
Still some vampires.
Oh, yeah.
So join us for that. And,
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Until then.
Yeah, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Campbell and Jones Meet the Monsters. I'm John Campbell.
I'm Brendan Jones.
And remember, there are such things as monsters.
And I didn't hiccup once.
Yeah.
I didn't hiccup once. Kept it down.